Ladies and gentlemen, coming to you from the Colonial Dungeon, this is the Court Martial Podcast! Introducing your host for this evening, he has a bald spot on the top of his head, and he weighs in tonight at a number you don't need to know. He is the Colonial Loudmouth, Shawn Michaels! And welcome to another exciting edition of the Court Martial Podcast. I am, as always, your Colonial Champion, Shawn McCarty, riding solo today. The one and only, your one and only, here to provide the quality, hard line of entertainment that you so desire, that you so crave, that you so wait with bated breath and anticipation on every single Friday, and occasionally Saturday, that we post, and the jubilation you must feel as you click on that YouTube video and hear my wonderful tones echoing through your TV set, on your laptop, on your phone, wherever you are, on the go, stay at home. I hope you're staying home and staying safe, but no matter where you are, you can catch your favorite pro wrestling podcast right here, the Court Martial Podcast, and I'm getting this out of the way now. While you're enjoying your time here, of course, do the usual, the like, the share, the subscribe, the bell button. You've heard it all from every other YouTuber before, so I'm not going to say waste your time in asking you to do it. I'm just hoping that you will. But things that we have to talk about today. This is going to be a controversial episode, I'm sure, because there are going to be some people who rebut what I'm about to talk about. And I am not one to shy away from unpopular opinions, especially when those unpopular opinions are ones that are usually fought back with opinions that aren't really the person's arguing's opinion, but more like the collective opinion, so it doesn't really feel like their own opinion. It feels like words that other people are using for them to describe why we should feel the way we should feel. And I guess the topic would help to elucidate what I'm referring to. The topic of the day today is intergender wrestling. Now, I'm going to approach this, as I do many things here on this show, from two perspectives, both of which are obviously subjective because they are both my opinions, but I'm trying to separate the two mindsets that I have regarding the world of pro wrestling to ensure that the distinction between the two is made as frequently as possible. I'm going to talk about this from a sports entertainment perspective, and then I'm going to talk about this from a pro wrestling perspective. Actually, I'm going to flip that. I'm going to do pro wrestling first, because I'm going to end on a high note. So from a pro wrestling perspective, I do not agree with the idea of intergender wrestling. Here's why. If you as a company were going under the guise, as was done back in the day, and I wish was at least a little more adhered to today by at least one company, then what you want is to have like-built athletes competing against each other, you know, with certain differences occasionally, but the men facing the men, because if you were going to do this, you would be under the assumption that this was direct athletic competition. When it was presented like a sport, but with stories, people came to watch the shows because they could suspend their disbelief that this is an athletic competition where the truly best of the best are competing for the world title, right? As a wrestling fan, as a pro wrestling guy, it just doesn't make sense to have a 6'4" jacked dude who's, over the top built and extremely athletic and is fighting really hard to lose to the 5'8" woman who's also very athletic and very well built. It just doesn't make physical sense. That would never happen in a real fight unless that woman was absolutely insane in the skilled in MMA and could really take them. But, you know, there's a reason UFC doesn't do that. There's a reason that they don't let people like Conor McGregor take on Amanda Nunes, or a better example, they don't let Brock Lesnar take on Ronda Rousey or Holly Holm. You just don't do that, because all it would take is a real stiff punch, and that's going to look real bad. And it's just, physically speaking, they're just not in the same league. And I'm not saying that derogatorily towards women, although people will label me a sexist, as I've already been labeled on this show. So from a pro wrestling standpoint, if you're trying to withstand the illusion and keep the illusion in place that this is an athletic competition where pro athletes of similar ilk compete against each other for the ultimate prize, then I don't agree that intergender wrestling should happen. I don't mind mixed tags, because that's something different. At least the rules stipulate the men have to face the men and the women have to face the women. You know, and you can get the occasional shot, and then you can get additional heat by the man actually hitting the woman, or a nice little fun baby face by the woman hitting the man and taking some of it. But there's limits to this, right? You can have men and women interact with each other in the ring. You just can't. I just don't believe, as a pro wrestling fan, you should have them competing in a competitive match, right? For a perfect example, and I'm going to use this later on too, to further enlighten the mood, but when Tessa Blanchard won the World Championship from Impact, which I didn't mind from a sports entertainment point of view, which we'll talk about in a minute, Sami Callihan looks like a vested up bag of actual russet potatoes. So, to some description, if you were to say about these two in an actual physical contest, I wouldn't really put it past Tessa Blanchard, who looks a lot better shape in a real fight, to outdo Sami Callihan. That's just of my personal opinion. But that's more me ragging on Sami than it is emphasizing my point. But here's the point I was trying to make. The way that Tessa won that championship opportunity was to beat, I think it was 4 other competitors, which included Michael Elgin. I forget who the rest of the other ones in there, but the person she pinned was Brian Cage. And for those of you who are following in my ACPW fantasy booking, you'll know that I have Brian Cage competing for my world championship coming up, because Brian Cage is just a fantastic physical specimen, and he's got great moves, and he can do a lot, and I'm excited to see, I would say I'm excited to see what he does in AEW, but I'm really not. I'm excited to see what I do with him, but this is the point I'm making. Think about what Brian Cage looks like, okay? He's a beefy, jacked dude who would squish me, the 5'11", 185-pound regular Joe. You know, I've got decent muscle, but nothing like Brian Cage does. He'd whip me into a pulp in a heartbeat. Imagine what he would do to, if this were a real fight, take kayfabe out of the equation, in a real fight, you would never see this. Because first of all, Brian Cage would go to jail for hitting a woman. And, well, hopefully, because there'd be hard enough evidence, and in this context, there'd be so many witnesses, but if this were a real competition, so there's that, first of all. If men actually hit women the way that they do in pro wrestling, or in sports entertainment, if this were still presented under the guise of it is all considered legitimate athletic competition, Brian Cage would go to jail. I mean, there's no way around that. But Tessa beating Brian Cage, or the other thing that they did shortly thereafter was that Sami Callihan was disposed, but the rest of OVE was messing around, I think, with Brian Cage, actually. And Tessa Blanchard came to make the save and beat 3 dudes, one of whom was Madman Fulton, who's like 6'8". That would never realistically happen. For the idea that you could suspend the disbelief and have the illusion that this was legitimate athletic competition, that would never, ever happen. It made no sense. It was one of those things that would immediately be like, oh, right, wrestling's all just a bunch of bullshit. And that, to me, as a pro wrestling standpoint, is a big part of why I don't like intergender wrestling. You would never see that type of interaction happen. It wouldn't happen. So to see, from a pro wrestling standpoint, it's an abomination. That's no knock on female wrestlers. From a wrestling standpoint, males versus males, females versus females, if this were a legitimate sport, that's how it would be done. You don't see the women's soccer team playing the men's soccer team, although in that case, I think the women probably would win. But you don't see the female, you don't see the female basketball players going up against the Boston Celtics. It's just, and more aptly, if you're looking for specifically combat sports, you don't see Mike Tyson I don't know any female boxers. You don't see Mike Tyson taking on any female boxer. I'm sorry, I don't follow female boxing, even if it is even a thing. So, but the point being, from a pro wrestling standpoint, it's not, I don't condone it from a pro wrestling standpoint. However, from a sports entertainment standpoint, it has to be done correctly. I will say this about Tessa's run and Tessa's reign. It sucked because Tessa is a diva, which is kind of an ironic statement. She's a great professional wrestler, but she's the person, from what I have read and what I've heard and the stories around why the Impact World Heavyweight Championship right now was transferred over to Eddie Edwards, was primarily because of this. But as far as her title win is concerned, she and Sammy put on a pretty decent match. Tessa knows how to work. And in that case, the way that they built it up and built up the rivalry between those two and the way they executed it, from a sports entertainment standpoint, it was fine. It was a big moment. I still don't personally agree with having a female as the world's champion, particularly because Impact is still trying to pass off the fact that they are legitimate athletic competition. To some degree, they're still trying to hold on to that format. Whereas Lucha Underground, and I've been singing their praises for the past couple of weeks because I've really enjoyed the way they did things, which had always admitted that it was a television show that used pro wrestling to tell its stories. They, from the very start of the program, said males are going against females. It's equal opportunity, meaning anybody can compete and come face each other and take the bumps. But it was understood that because it's a TV show, everybody could take the bumps because it's a different format. It's not supposed to be passed off as legitimate physical competition. So in that sense, they could do something like Evil East teaming up with Angelico and Son of Havoc to win the 6-man or the 6-person tag titles. Or, even to the description, Sexy Star winning the world title. However, here's my critique about that. You want a template of how it shouldn't be done. If you're gonna be that and make a female the world's champion, do not have her beat the monster heel that you've got on the show. I did not like the fact that they decided Mil Muertes, of all people, for her to go over. In the same way that I didn't like the fact that Tessa Blanchard beat Brian Cage. It's just, if you're going to do it as a sports entertainment value or just as an entertainment value, don't hurt the other people you have in play by making them lose that match to somebody like Sexy Star. And again, it wasn't necessarily that I didn't agree with it being done. It was just the booking of how they did it I didn't care for. Whereas I liked Tessa beating Sammy because you could at least argue that Tessa probably could beat Sammy in a fight. I'm not saying she would, but I'm saying she could. That still felt a little bit better just for the fact of the way, it all depends on how you do it. But if you're honest about the fact that you're not trying to present what you're doing as sport, and I mean not just being like, oh, we're still going to do the sports format, but we're not a sport, we're just fucking around. It's like, you need to either decide that formatically you're not going to frame your show the way that other pro wrestling shows would, that would involve feeling legitimate, as a legitimate athlete and not as a performer and doing my art. But so I guess that's the case of this, is that intergender wrestling definitely has its role in sports entertainment. And I don't mind it in sports entertainment when it's executed well. And that's what I'm waiting to see. If a format like Lucha Underground had a win like Tessa winning the world title, I'd be more inclined to, or even, she lost the title, did Sexy Star, to Johnny Mundo. Why couldn't she have pinned Johnny Mundo? That's all I'm saying. It's like, why couldn't she have worked with somebody like that instead? Just somebody a little bit more her size that wasn't the big monster 6'10" heel. Because even with a very overt, nondescript, a very overt way of saying we're not athletically inclined, you still don't want to have the bigger guys lose to the smallest girls. You know, there is such a thing as too much David and Goliath, which I think happens from time to time. And with that said, it definitely has its place in sports entertainment. I don't like it in the pro wrestling context, but I'm willing to see where some sports entertainment companies take it if they are to choose that path and can pull it off in a way that still makes it feel somewhat viable that it's taking place. Alrighty, folks. So there's my big controversial thing, and if you haven't shut off the podcast by now, you might after this, because it is return of the Intricate Notes Skylar Greenberg. Because as we made a deal with you, the fans, that if we got 10 likes and 5 comments, Skylar Greenberg was going to watch Extreme Rules and comment it on this show. We got a couple likes, and we only got one bot telling us to go to a very glitchy site. Shady link. We got a guy with a shady link. So I need more. I need more from you people. I know that you can do it. Takes 2 seconds. Just type in a letter. Type in a number. Just anything. Doesn't matter. Well, it does matter, but it doesn't matter. We made the deal that if there was 10 likes and 5 comments, Skylar would watch Extreme Rules, and of course we did not meet that goal. However, because Skylar is begging and dying and aching to be on this show to speak to you, the listeners of the Court Martial podcast, he's doing it for you because he is so dead on focused and bleeding from his eyes and his heart in desperation to come onto this show to talk to you. He watched it anyway. And now I'm going to read his notes as what we're going to hear as far as what happened. I did not watch this show because I am taking a current sports entertainment hiatus, which means I'm not watching AEW, I'm not watching WWE. I may do a SummerSlam review. The jury's still out on that. But let's read Skylar's notes that he sent to me, and we will get a review from Skylar on how Extreme Rules went. Hello, colonist. It's Skylar. What day is today? Tuesday or something? It's obviously Friday, Sky. It's obviously, or Saturday. You're right. I don't even know what day it is. Who knows what day it is anymore? We got a pandemic to live through. Nobody knows what day it is. I don't know. I've been in a stupor ever since I watched Extreme Rules. I decided to watch it out of curiosity, and boy, I was saddened by what I was watching. No surprises there. Rey Mysterio, and yes, I will be knocking points off Sky for poor grammar, but it's okay. I'll only do it a couple times. Rey Mysterio and Seth Rollins working very hard for a match stipulation that was never going to satisfy anyone unless they went into a shoot and took someone's eye, and they didn't. R.I.P. out an eye or did they didn't even rip out an eye or did CGI. They did a camera cutaway and came back with a fake plastic eye. Lame. What did you expect they were going to do? They picked a stipulation that was awful. And they were obviously going to go for, I think that was like a ping pong ball. That wouldn't have even fit in somebody's eye. It was pretty weak. At least from the photo I saw. So that was lame. Sasha Banks and Asuka having a great match up until an overbooked finish that saw Bayley steal the referee's shirt after the ref took a bump and fast count Sasha for the win. So all the power of the referee belongs in a shirt. That's the way that WWE has been booking for a very long time, where all you have to do is have a striped shirt. If you wear a striped shirt that is black and white, you can come down to the ring and just make counts anytime. You wear a referee's shirt, you can just run in, make a count, and that's pretty much it. That's the way that pro wrestling is now. That sports entertainment is. You don't see Tom Brady stealing an NFL's ref shirt and hat and calling a pass interference call on the other team. Do you guys? Well, not necessarily. But there are other ways. And then he wrote down twice, "feckin' stupid," which may be a theme here. MVP declaring himself the champion after Apollo Crews didn't come out due to an injury, which was, I believe, potentially crisis related. But I do love the look of that new United States Championship belt. I was sick of that hyper patriotic red, white, and blue design. I think it needed the revamp, and I think the revamp looks really good. And moving right along, Dolph Ziggler declaring his match with Drew McIntyre, Extreme Rules, but only for Dolph, was a smart heel tactic, even though it would have been, there's nothing extreme about this show, so they shouldn't have even called this Extreme Rules. But it's Dolph Ziggler. Dolph Ziggler does not win nice things, which is true, even though this wouldn't have been worth... this was probably the best match, quote-unquote, on the show, but still, I didn't watch it. And the Swamp Fight. It was 17 minutes long, it had 2 minutes of actual fighting, and was a deconstruction of Braun Strowman. But sadly, WWE can't even make a B-movie and wasted basically 3 hours of people's time. They've been doing that for years. But this was a... Here's my thing about the cinematics, and I was having a very intense argument with somebody the other day about this. It's not that I don't like the idea of the cinematics, because we've talked about that on the show. And I withdrew my enjoyment of the cinematics. The cinematics themselves are not the problems. It's the fact that WWE is bad at it. And that they don't... I personally don't like the humor that they ingest in it. I don't like the way they frame a lot of these things. I mean, with Bray Wyatt, it usually is a little improved because they can kind of smoke and mirrors their way through a lot of fast cuts, but it's the more of these they've had to do, I thought they would improve with them, and they really have not. And then, at least Nakamura and Cesaro beat the New Day for the SmackDown Tag Titles. By the way, where are the Raw Tag Titles? Oh yeah, Street Profits, never mind. Yeah, they're too busy fighting ninjas with turkey legs with the Viking curmudgeons. Listen, people, WWE has given up on pro wrestling and decided they are sports entertainment. That we knew from that. We have long established that on this show. It is what it is, but now it's not even entertaining, and it's not entertaining. Then if it's not entertaining, then why should you or me spend any more time or money watching it? This is Sky, by the way. Vince McMahon no longer knows what is entertaining anymore and either should retire or give up his position. But since he will never retire and have to wait to the day of RIP before we see any CHANGE, he knows how to spell change. Changes and face the strange changes. Sorry. I have said the Report Pro Wrestling is on life support and will continue to be a shell of itself if WWE and AEW are allowed to make the choices it continues to make. And clearly American Pro Wrestling will be taken over by Japanese-style wrestling. I inherently disagree with that, because Japanese-style wrestling is going through the exact same problem. Because they have these fucking goofs who think that it's all silly and fun, and they should just be messing around, and it's all fake, so why don't we just play kitty corner jack-off with each other? So Japanese Pro Wrestling is just as much getting chewed out, so to speak. So it's really just, it's major stream wrestling is pretty much dead. And now going back to Sky, but I for one welcome our new Japanese wrestling overlords, which they will not be, since they're the only ones who make sense in times like these. Subscribe to New Japan World so you can... I'm not... No. I'm not writing all that. I'm not giving New Japan that kind of endorsement. I'm not saying that they don't, because I've liked a few New Japan matches I've watched, but I personally think the New Japan matches go too long, and their shows go too long, and everybody gets 20-some-odd minutes, and it's not... And I know it's a different style, but it's not necessarily my cup of tea. But Skylar's comments, which are only his own and are no way reflective of the Core Martial Podcast affiliates, says that you subscribe to New Japan World so you can see some great wrestlers like Okada and Evil and Naito and Kota Ibushi and he had also added Kenny Omega when he was good. Debatable whether he ever was. I think he just had the right people by him to showcase what he was doing. Sorry this was long and depressing, but it be what it be. See you all for NWL's next show, Summer Showdown, and the main event, NWL Survival Games. No, not Survivor Series, because I don't rip off ideas from companies below my own. So, a damning report of Extreme Rules from Skylar Greenberg, as well as my own little footnotes. And it's up to you to decide which ones are which. There's some of his influence, some of my influence in that. But it's very clear that even still, thank you, Sky, for submitting those. I've always viewed he and I also have a great chemistry as far as when we do these podcasts. And speaking of great chemistry, wait, are we at the second half of the show? Oh, we're there? Oh, shit. You know what time it is. Roll that intro, baby.
What time is it?
It's the fight, it's the brawl, it's the match of the week. It's tonight, watch along with the son of a beat. It's one fall, the down for the 1, 2, and 3. So don't stall, hang on to the edge of your seat. We got a punch and a flip and a powerbomb too. All the moves and the stars are all under review. See the baby face cheered and the heels get heat. This is wrestling at its peak. It's the match of the week.
You know it, I know it, everybody knows it. It is the match of the week, and today we have a great thought at what might be a match of the week. It is Shawn Michaels versus Bret Hart for the WWF Championship. Which one, you might ask? Well, I have chosen Survivor Series 1992. You can find this video not only in the description of last week's video, but also in the description below, so you can go back and watch this match with all of these things in mind. This was a 36-minute YouTube video that included tapes from both Sean Mooney interviewing Shawn Michaels and Mean Gene interviewing Bret. And Shawn's promo, while it was very stinging, you could barely hear it because he just spoke so softly, and the mic, you couldn't pick it up with the mic, and Mooney was trying to move the mic all around to catch what Shawn was saying, and he didn't. So it kind of came in and out. Then Shawn Michaels came out to the female sung version of his music, which is right when he was just starting to get that sexy boy gimmick going, because you got to keep in mind that it was not that long earlier that Shawn Michaels had super kicked Jannetty and put him through the barbershop window. And Sherry Martel wasn't there, but Shawn Michaels was still the heel in this situation. Bret Hart, who had beaten Ric Flair earlier, I think just like a month earlier, Bret Hart gave a promo with Mean Gene, and of course, Mean Gene definitely knew how to ham it up. And I love the fact that the heels got one announcer and the baby faces got another announcer. That had two different looking sets as well. That Mooney was in the back with Michaels and Okerlund was with Bret was, I think, a great idea and a great decision. And I wish that more companies would do stuff like that, so you had more personality going, interacting with your talent. Mean Gene, he's so good. He knew how to ham that up to get everybody looking good. He made Bret look like $1 million without Bret even opening his mouth, just by the sheer professional presentation and really just being able to put Bret over before Bret said it. And Bret gave a really dry promo, but you still looked in his eyes, and you could still believe that he believed what he said. And you could still believe in Bret Hart, and I really did like that. Then, as Bret's coming to the ring, Vince McMahon, and I just thought of this meme because it was just funny. Vince McMahon said something along the lines, Vince and Bobby Heenan on commentary, and Vince said something about Shawn Michaels being the best athlete, about Bret Hart being the best athlete, and that Bret Hart is definitely the best athlete in wrestling today. And Bobby, the second that Vince finishes, just goes, wrong. it just reminded me of the meme that you see going around to the GIF of the orange one doing using that. I'm not even gonna say his name, not for any good or bad. I just don't want it to become part of a conversation that I don't really want to have on this channel. And so then this was prior to the heat between Bret and Shawn, so they all cooperated and behaved themselves during this match. This match was slow. That is probably my only critique of this whole match, is that it was slow. It was slow starting. It was slow getting to all of the heat spots. It was slow during the comeback, and it was slow during the finish. You know, they sped it up occasionally, but you could kind of tell that the fans were either burnt out from the rest of the show that they had seen, which I think was a big part of it, but it went on for a while, and it just never really picked up the excitement for me. And from Shawn and Bret, I mean, obviously everything they did was airtight and super solid and looked fantastic, and it was a really good match. I'm not saying it wasn't a really good match because it's Bret and Shawn, but this is 1992, and it just wasn't the matches that they were going to have. Let me put it that way. I also think that because these two are such strong personalities, that I found it hard to determine who was calling the match, whether it was Shawn or Bret. To me, it looked like a Bret match, because Bret was going through, you know, obviously coming into making the comeback, but you didn't see anything of Shawn's that you would come to know from a staple Shawn Michaels match. It looked more like Shawn was wrestling Bret's match, and I guess in that circumstance, yes, he had to, because this was also pre-Click. Because Shawn's there, and Shawn's been there since the Rockers. This was Thanksgiving Day of '92. Scott Hall had just come in during the summer, and well, he debuted in, I think, March, but he was, you know, he had really been at a decent summer. He was going into '92, so Scott had just gotten there. Wallman wouldn't get in until '93. Triple H wouldn't be there until '95, and Nash wouldn't be in there until '93, until the summer of '93. So really, when Diesel was revealed as Shawn's bodyguard, and that's when the Click really started becoming what it was. So this was pre-Click and pre-that, so this was probably Shawn doing professional work with Bret. You know, so it was... The match, of course, was great. Hebner at the very beginning had a fast count. They did a lot of work. Bret spent probably the first 5 or 6 minutes just working on Michael's arm. They do that double flip through the pin, you know, where one of them is holding the top rope and the other comes up behind and tries to push them and use the momentum of springing off the ropes to flip them both backwards so that one of them could be seated on top of the other for a 2 count, usually for a 2 count. You barely see that ever win any nowadays. And then after that, Shawn kind of boots out of it, comes back, and Bret hits a crossbody. Beautiful. And right after that, Vince says both of these athletes are on Ica Pro, which was a fun little ad. It was getting the Ica Pro bit in there, because he had to get the Ica Pro bit in there. And then Shawn's heel tactics really weren't much heel tactics. It was mostly... It was subtle. It was subtle heel work, and I think that was also why the fans didn't get as into this as I thought they would, because I don't think Shawn was healing it up enough for fans to really be wanting Bret to really make a comeback that was meaningful. For example, Bret, I think, had like a hammerlock or something, and then Shawn just turns around and pelts him with a right hand. It looked like a closed fist punch, which would have been illegal, which would have been a decent heat spot if the fans were paying attention, but of course, it's, you know, I was able to catch it, and then Shawn started hitting right hands. There were a lot of punches being thrown, and then 16 and a half minutes into this video, they do a drop-down leapfrog. This is at least 8 minutes into the match, and they do the drop-down leapfrog spot, and that ends up being the heel spot because Shawn ducks, and Bret hits his throat on the top rope. I think Shawn might have lifted him up a little bit, so he was a little upset, you know. It was kind of heelish, so that ended up being the heat spot, but most of his heat was just based off lucky encounters, you know, the way that they did that, because then Bret really started hamming up and trying to gain the sympathy, and Shawn, there was an Irish whip spot where they do the chest bump into the top turnbuckle just based on the momentum where they keep running, and Bret did that. Oh my God, it got the biggest pop of the night. It was brutal. It was brutal. And then Shawn does a headlock, and he's getting in the headlock, you know, really wrenching it in, just starting to wear Bret down so Bret can start to make some little bit of a comeback. And what was interesting is that as Hurl was talking to Shawn, you know, trying to say make sure that's not a choke, you can actually see Shawn kind of readjust his body so that his arm kind of shimmies a little bit closer to like the chin. So I think that it was just Shawn repositioning himself, but what it also did inadvertently was also display the Hebner that no, he didn't have a choke on him, but then he immediately kind of lowered his body back down to kind of cinch it back in a difficult way. This was all, it's all very airtight stuff. Then there's a flurry hope spot where Bret gets a couple punches, boom, 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 gets an Irish whip and gets a drop kick from Shawn. But each hope spot that Bret did, which there was probably over the course of, 5 or 6 minutes, or maybe even more, probably even 6 or 7, Bret got a little more offense in every hope spot. Then finally Bret hits a back suplex on the actual comeback, on the real big comeback. Hits a back suplex, and the sell by Shawn Michaels is hysterical. Go back and watch this. I can't remember what time stamp it was, but Bret hits a back suplex, and Shawn Michaels flops like a fish. His 2005 Shawn Michaels would have been proud. Which kind of just emphasizes how good Shawn was at overselling as a heel for the babyface. Because as a heel, you're really kind of supposed to oversell to make the babyface making the comebacks offense look better. And Shawn did that. The thing is, Shawn, of course, knew that he could do that well and took it to ridiculous lengths when he had opportunities like that a la Hulk Hogan. The arm work at the beginning, by the time that this match got into the back third, was just non-existent. But it didn't seem to matter. There was a great superplex. Then there was a ref bump. There's counter to Bret to the outside. Michaels goes down and hits a scoop slam on the floor. Comes back in. There's a little bit more fighting. There's some false finishes that look really good. A nice false finish. I think it was a roll up or something that Shawn Michaels kicked out of, and then when Bret came to charge him, Shawn hit the super kick. But it was too tired. He couldn't cover. Then Shawn Michaels grabbed Bret, and Bret raked Shawn's eyes, further adding to the confusion of who's the heel and who's the babyface here, especially because most of Shawn's stuff, even though there was subtle heel moves, it was still pretty much clean. Then Shawn Michaels gets up to the top to do I don't know what, maybe a drop kick to Bret, who stood up. Shawn Michaels goes to hit it, of course, falls down, gets the back bump, Bret locks right into the sharpshooter, and Shawn taps. And then Santa shows up, because of course it's Thanksgiving, so Santa Claus shows up, he hands Bret a Santa Claus hat, and then it starts to snow in the arena. And Bret Hart is celebrating his Survivor Series win with Santa Claus with fake snow falling from the rafters. And it just goes to show that no matter when it comes to the WWF, when it comes to Vince McMahon's WWF, stupid, hokey stuff like that, you can't avoid it. And you couldn't avoid it. It was dumb. It really took away from Bret, and it didn't help what was already kind of a flat situation with that. I thought that this match, I really did think this match was going to be better. I don't want to say it fell flat because there was still some level of fan investment, but this was not the kind of match that they would come to have. That is a guarantee. That is a fact. And it's also worth noting that Shawn Michaels was the Intercontinental Champion at the time. So so there was really no way that Shawn was going to win this match realistically, but still, both guys looked great because it's a great match with two great technicians, and their technical abilities were very much put over by both of them and the announcers and the interview guys. So they obviously still got a lot out of this match. However, it just wasn't what I remember it being, and that's no fault of either guy. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. That's the nature of the beast. And speaking of the nature of the beast, we're gonna talk in our superstar spotlight, and I don't think we've covered him yet. And I am excited to talk about this guy because he is one of the, pretty much the solitary reason why I got into pro wrestling in the first place. We're going to talk about Shawn Michaels. The Heartbreak Kid, the showstopper, the icon, whatever you want to call him. Shawn, to me, I'm going to talk on a personal level first. Shawn, to me, was instrumental in me loving pro wrestling because my name was also Shawn, and I had the same initials as he did. And I got to kind of live vicariously through Shawn Michaels, who happened to be terrific at what he did. And it immediately infatuated me into pro wrestling, having somebody like Shawn Michaels, especially having Shawn Michaels. The main period of me liking and enjoying Shawn Michaels was 2002, when he came back and I was living vicariously through him, and Triple H did all that nasty stuff to him after his back injury, and I really had heat on Triple H. I was pissed and wanted to see Triple H get his ass kicked, and it kept me buying tickets. And Shawn is, hands down, one of the best in-ring performers of all time. He's terrific. No matter what kind of match he's in, Shawn knew how to make wrestling work for him, and it turned out terrific matches through and through. He knew how to draw the right sympathy. He could get heat when he wanted to and when he needed to. Shawn was a great performer, a great wrestler. Maybe, as many argue, one of the best of all time when it comes to actual in-ring work. When it comes to in-ring work, Shawn is unequal. As a draw, but Shawn, everything, he's the reason I got into wrestling. It was a big reason, just seeing a guy like him, defy the odds, overcome all of the odds that it took to get where he needed to be. And it's funny is that a lot of times Shawn didn't overcome the odds, but he had matches that were so incredibly good that even when he didn't, you still loved and believed in Shawn Michaels, and you wanted to see Shawn Michaels succeed. I mean, there have been so many matches, to list the amount of Shawn Michaels matches that I've loved or have really enjoyed. It's endless. His stuff in 95 and 96 is good. But it comes at a time when the rest of the show was suffering, and that's kind of also why Shawn wasn't as big a draw, because the rest of the show just was framed kind of poorly. But he had stuff good there. I mean, his thing in 92, his stuff with the Rockers was great. He was a great tag wrestler. He was for a while. I remember watching an AWA show with Shawn Michaels in it from like 81 or 84. I can't remember when specifically it was that Shawn was there, but he had this really short, like almost flat top cut. I don't know where, if I could find it. I might be able to find him. WWE may have it, but I doubt that they would air that. But who knows? But some of the big matches for me was everything with him and Triple H. I mean, he and Triple H had an incredible chemistry. And Shawn knew exactly what to do, and Triple H knew exactly what to do. Not a single match of theirs I could say, no, I wouldn't recommend that match to watch. I mean, it's great. Everything that Shawn did with Flair, is particularly the finale of Ric Flair's career, at least in WWE, kinda. All of his matches, everything from pretty much 2002 on. I mean, that's not to say he was, flawless. He had a really good match with Christian in Canada in 2004, I believe. And I can't remember what episode of Raw that was on, but I do remember them having the match and enjoying that match. What else? God, I mean, everything that he did in 2006 with him and Triple H, the way that Shawn put Umaga over was big. Their Hell in a Cell match was big. Their tag matches where they squashed the Spirit Squad was fun. Even though, I mean, let alone them being saddled with a terrible gimmick. Those poor guys getting that gimmick and then having to be cannon fodder for Shawn and Triple H. And that's not even Shawn and Triple H's fault. It's like, anyway. his stuff with The Undertaker. I mean, they argued that those are some of the best matches of all time. Were the WrestleMania matches with Shawn and Taker. I mean, his track record was great with that. I mean, really, you could look up any match with Shawn. His match with Shelton Benjamin, when Shelton Benjamin did the springboard and Shawn caught him in midair, was incredible. I mean, you'd be hard-pressed to find stinker Shawn Michaels matches unless Shawn Michaels wanted the match to suck. Because that's the thing, really, the point I want to make with Shawn Michaels. Shawn Michaels, I believe, was one of the first people to weaponize wrestling to his advantage. What I mean by that is that Shawn knew he could work, and he knew he could get anything out of anybody at any time because he was so good at what he did. So, as a result, he was able to use that and be unprofessional in the ring, a la Hulk Hogan in 2005, where Shawn oversold everything under the sun, and I think part of that was just big egos, because Shawn wanted a return and a win. Hulk wanted to win all 3 matches in that program, because it's Hulk. You know, and as Jim Cornette so eloquently put it just recently, you can't out-Hulk Hulk. You know, and that's, I think, what that all boiled down to. But Shawn got the last laugh because he made Hogan look like a total idiot in that match with the way that he sold. Same thing with 96 and Vader. I told you that this was, you know, it was when Shawn wanted to make you look like $1 million that you look like 10. But when Leon pulls your hair and Shawn Michaels decides, and then you forget a spot, and Shawn Michaels decides mid-match to alter his direction, just yell, "Move, you dumb motherfucker," and kick you in the face for real. You know, there were times that Shawn was just unprofessional. It's on camera. It's on camera. And I'm not speaking to Shawn's character, because him as a human being, I don't know the guy, right? I idolized him as a kid. I don't know the guy. I've heard he's done a lot of really nasty things, but I also know that he's a changed guy now. I think he's changed for the better, at least from what I can tell, because now he's interested in helping the young talent, and he's really matured. I personally, from his career, right? I'm talking specifically about his career, not his personal life or anything that he's done or any people he's kept down. That's not what my discussion is here. I respect everything that Shawn Michaels has contributed to the business, even if it was in the mindset of his own personal benefit. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, even though Shawn used wrestling to get what he wanted, what he gave to wrestling, being the performer that he was, I think either is of equal or greater measure, depending on how you view it, depending on how much you actually know Shawn Michaels. I don't. I'm just talking about this from a perspective of a smark who happened to grow up really liking Shawn Michaels as a fan, but I can also understand why people don't. You know, the only match I say that I really didn't like of his was this most recent one that he had that nobody wants to talk about at Crown Jewel, where everybody sucked, and Triple H tore his pec, and Shawn Michaels was slow and nearly died, and Kane lost his mask, and oof. Just oof. And so, but for what it's worth, Shawn Michaels is very much a crucial puzzle piece in the labyrinth puzzle that is WWE. And Shawn's legacy in pro wrestling is going to have its place, I think, and deserves to have its place. Was he ever the top drawing guy? No. Not by a long shot. But and you could argue that as a result, Shawn was a mid to upper card talent who wasn't drawing the tickets, who wasn't the draw, but he was part of the reason that the fans kept coming to the shows, because he knew how to work his ass off. So, he always made what he did look good. And I have a much respect for the career of Shawn Michaels. And don't be surprised if you see some more of these Shawn Michaels matches show up on the match of the week, because it's what he's got going for him, or what he had going for him, and what the mark that he left as far as the replayability of his work, and just a whole, there's so much that can be said about Shawn Michaels. There's so much that can be said, but unfortunately it is time to take our first commercial break. when we get back, we are going to have a returning guest coming in to review a triple threat match from TNA that many people seem to really like. And I can't wait to see you. He can't wait to see you. And we will see you then. But until then, please enjoy these messages from our sponsors. Thank you very much for listening, ladies and gentlemen. We will be right back.